With the presidential election right around the corner, what principles must Catholic voters consider when heading to the polls? Cardinal Raymond Burke shares his thoughts. And for the latest on the race, GOP strategist and CPAC president Matt Schlapp is here with analysis. The Synod on Synodality in Rome finally wrapped last week, but it continues to make news. How will synodality be felt in parishes around the world? The National Catholic Register's senior correspondent Edward Penton reports, and the Papal Posse, Father Gerald Murray and Robert Royal, bring their insights. The World Over begins right now.
Now, Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. An important show for you tonight. If you'd like to send me a nice comment, send it to an X post. I'm at Raymond Arroyo or at Real Raymond Arroyo on Instagram. Lots to cover tonight. Let's begin. The next presidential election is days away, with polls showing a very tight race between Democrat Kamala Harris and Republican former President Donald J. Trump. Recent polling by Arizona Christian University shows that 32 million Christians, including as many as 19 million Catholics, may choose not to vote in this year's U.S. elections. How are Catholic voters to view these two candidates when they choose a new commander-in-chief? And what are our obligations to the Republic as Catholic Americans? Here to share his thoughts on the moral concerns regarding voting is the former head of the Vatican's highest court, one of the world's foremost canon lawyers, and author of Moral Questions Regarding Voting. Please welcome back to the program, Cardinal Raymond Burke. Your Eminence, thank you for being with us again.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
I want to begin with the principles a Catholic voter should consider when casting his or her ballot. Look, there's been a lot of talk from partisan Catholics suggesting that people shouldn't be single-issue voters, that climate change, immigration, life, capital punishment all constitute a life ethic and therefore mitigate abortion as a preeminent issue. Your Eminence, how would you respond to that?
Well, of course, we are all concerned about all of these issues, but there are some issues which absolutely have the priority, and those are the fundamental goods of human life, of marriage and the family, and of religious freedom. And we must give our first attention to those issues while also considering the others. But if we don't protect human life from its inception to natural death, if we aren't safeguarding the integrity of marriage and the family, if we're not safeguarding the freedom of religion, then these other issues are not going to be addressed correctly either. And so that's my perspective, and perspective of the Church is that we have to be very attentive to what these so-called non-negotiable matters, and make sure that wherever there's some ray of hope, as I put it in my statement, some good reason to think we can advance the cause of life and the family and religious freedom, that's the kind of candidate we need to support. To not vote at all in a democracy like our own, where there are the two major parties, is basically, first of all, fail in our own duty to try to support a candidate, even if he or she is highly flawed, but at least gives us some hope to advance the cause of life and the family and religious freedom, and not to vote at all. That's not responsible on our part. We have an obligation to vote, and ours is a great nation, and all of us have. At my age, I think of so much gratitude for everything that the United States has meant for me, notwithstanding its faults. And I want, as much as I possibly can, according to my Christian duty and obedience to the fourth commandment, to do what is for the common good in our nation.
Cardinal Burke, you recently posted moral questions regarding voting on your website. It's a guide for Catholics voting in the U.S. election next week. And you write this: for Catholics, as for all men and women of goodwill, the question is, in fulfilling our civic duty to vote, how can we be obedient to the law of God written upon our hearts in the present situation of deplorable moral and therefore cultural decline and decay? Your Eminence, in your guide, you emphasize human life, marriage, family, religious freedom, as you just mentioned, as the preeminent issues for the common good, for Catholics to consider as they go into the voting place. How and why should Catholics prioritize those above party allegiance or personality, which seems to govern a lot of the vote today?
Well, we are servants of God, first of all, and being good servants of God, then we are good servants to our country. And if we don't obey God's law, then we're not going to serve well our country. And so these three goods, life, family, and religion, are written on the human heart. That's how God made us. He inscribed our law, his law, excuse me. He inscribed his law in our hearts, and we must be obedient to that law. And in that obedience, we serve not only our own good, but the good of our neighbor, the good of the local community, the good of the nation. And so it's as simple as that. And to let some other issue predominate in our minds over these issues is simply not correct.
Your Eminence, Pope Francis himself addressed voting and where American Catholics should cast their vote, advising them to vote, quote, the lesser of two evils. He said this: both are against life, whether it is the one chasing away migrants or the one that kills children. Both are against life. Cardinal Burke, your reaction, and is turning a migrant away at the border equal to killing an unborn child morally?
No, clearly not. To take an innocent and defenseless human life is intrinsically evil. The question about migration is one of prudential judgment. Who is asking to be received into the country, the ability of the country to receive persons who legitimately want to migrate from their homeland to the United States. These are prudential judgments. One can be mistaken in making a judgment about refusing a migrant entry, but it's not an intrinsic evil to refuse a migrant entry. There are all different situations in which people who want to enter this country find themselves, and we, for their own sake and for the good of our nation, have to be attentive to who we receive into the country, and then also our ability to provide a life for them here that will not lead to something immoral or illegal or harmful.
Yeah, Your Eminence, there's also this, I think, wrong understanding that somehow the government has no right, and Catholic teaching provides the government with the right to regulate immigration for the good of its own citizens and to ensure the moral well-being of everybody. I mean, that's part of the common good. And I think this idea, somehow this has gotten into the body politic and into the minds of many Catholics, that if you don't support unfettered immigration with no form of chaos where people just come into the country willy-nilly, that you're somehow not welcoming the migrant or being, anti-Catholic in some way, or breaking Catholic moral teaching or social teaching.
No, it's very true, and the open immigration without any prudential judgment can change the character of a whole nation. We, having lived in Europe for a number of years, I've seen this in countries that have just received indiscriminately immigrants. It's changing the character of the nation, because some of the people whom they've admitted have come into the country with the intent to use the country to advance their own goals and not for the good of not for the common good. And so, no, what you say is absolutely true.
Your Eminence, in moral questions regarding voting, you offer some suggestions to Catholics headed to the ballot box. 1, pray and fast for our nation. 2, oppose harmful agendas. 3, study the agenda of each candidate. 4, is there hope that a candidate will pursue the moral law? And 5, vote according to informed conscience. Your Eminence, why is that the recommended progression? Pray, fast, study, and then vote.
Well, our first inclination, our first Christian inspiration before a situation like our own, which is one of moral and cultural decline and decay, is to pray for the nation, to fast, to do all that we can to build up our own lives in order to be good citizens and to be agents of the transformation of our society and of our culture. Then secondly, we have to make very clear what we know, what our Lord himself teaches us, what he's written on our hearts about the good of the nation, that there must be the respect for the inviolable dignity of every human life. There must be respect for the integrity of the human family, and there must be the safeguarding of the freedom to practice religion, and then all the other subordinate issues which may arise. And so we are ardent in our making clear what our stand is in these matters. Then we have to look at each candidate to see, well, is there some hope? Presently, both for instance, the platforms of the two major political parties in this country are both have gravely morally objectionable content. And so we have to then study each candidate and see, is there one that offers more hope that we can advance the culture of life, the culture of the family, the culture of religion in our society. And if we see that ray of hope, then that's where our conscience will tell us to give our vote. And fundamentally, unless one is convinced that no candidate will advance the common good in any way, would one be justified in not voting at all. But there is a duty to vote as citizens of the nation in order to do our part to advance the good of everyone.
Well, Your Eminence, mindful of what you wrote, and what you wrote is there hope that a candidate will pursue the moral law? I want to play some sound for you. This is Kamala Harris in a recent interview with CBS and then MSNBC, talking about the repeal of Roe v. Wade and her opponent's role in making that happen. Watch.
We have seen extraordinary harm and pain and suffering happen because of what Donald Trump did in intending and effectuating an overturning of Roe v. Wade. Yes, my first priority is to put back in place those protections and to stop this pain and to stop this injustice that is happening around our country.
What concessions would be on the table? Religious exemptions, for example? Is that something that you would consider?
I don't think we should be making concessions when we're talking about a fundamental freedom to make decisions about your own body.
Your Eminence, does that position offer any hope of persuasion on the moral question of abortion in that candidate's platform?
Certainly not. It's a very sad commentary. I'm not here to endorse any candidate, but that kind of statement is completely unacceptable. There's no way that permitting a woman to provide for the killing of the child in her womb is serving the good of that woman, and certainly not the good of the child. And this is and people whose religion teaches them, as ours does, that this is contrary to God's law, something intrinsically evil, to be forced by our government to support and to finance such immoral acts is completely unacceptable.
Mm-hmm. Cardinal Burke, the GOP candidate Donald Trump caused much controversy in the pro-life community when he announced his IVF mandate, which I asked him about in a recent interview. Watch. The other day you said, I'm the father of IVF. As you know, some Catholics feel, and the Catholic Church believes, when you implement this technology, you're killing embryos. Will you have a religious exemption to your IVF mandate for religious organizations and businesses that feel this violates my religious principles?
Well, you know, I haven't been asked that, but it sounds to me like a pretty good idea, frankly. But even Catholics, a lot of them, they want IVF. It's fertilization, basically. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they view that as helping a family, helping parents have a child. And it's a very popular thing, but certainly if there's a religious problem, I think people should go with that. I really think they should be able to do that, but we'll look at that.
Your Eminence, how should Catholics view this? Obviously, IVF has all kinds of moral and ethical problems, but your thoughts on at least Trump's openness here to religious exemptions?
Well, in my own experience, I've encountered many devout Catholics who simply do not understand the moral questions involved with in vitro fertilization. And I believe that this is a difficulty in the general population, that many people don't realize what is involved. Certainly to assist a couple to conceive and bring to birth a child according to God's plan for the procreation and education of children is a good thing. But IVF there are these very serious difficulties. I would say from the text that you've, and because of these difficulties, a Catholic institution would not be able to cooperate with the procedure. Certainly from the text that you've quoted to me, it seems to me that there is a willingness to hear the religious objections to, and there really are fundamentally moral objections, which certainly right religion teaches. But it seems that there's an openness to hear and to respect those convictions, which are at the very foundations of one's moral life.
Yeah. Your Eminence, I've heard from a lot of pro-lifers and even pro-life activists complaining this season that this candidate or that is not pro-life enough. They allow too many exemptions, or exceptions rather. But isn't that a failing on the part of the pro-life community and frankly the church, that they haven't been able to sufficiently convert hearts or teach the truth regarding these life issues, and therefore there's no working consensus in the electorate any longer?
Well, certainly we need to give a much stronger witness to the truth about human life, about human sexuality, because there is simply a tremendous amount of either ignorance or people are simply not taking seriously these fundamental issues. And so the work is tremendous. I see a lot of hope. I see a lot of wonderful young families with children. I see a lot of young people, also older people, who are devoting themselves to the promotion of the respect for human life, for the family, for religion. But we need to engage more and more of our fellow citizens in this endeavor to promote the good of the nation. And in that regard, yes, we have to take some responsibility for this. On the other hand, we have to oppose any political power that's using its power to ruthlessly silence any pro-life work or silence the religious conscience, not permit Catholic institutions and individuals to act according to their own conscience. And that, in that regard, I see a great need to raise up in our society politicians who will defend human life. We'll defend the integrity of human nature as God has created it. We'll defend the freedom of religion.
Your Eminence, the Synod on Synodality just wrapped in Rome last week, sort of. I mean, the study groups will continue to meet until June. But what do you make of that final document calling for a new synodal version of the Mass and really an ongoing synodal process?
Well, I've been very clear about this from the beginning. No one has been able to define what the meaning of synodality is. This has become a kind of a placeholder for advancing all kinds of ideas about the Church, about the sacred liturgy. The Church's hierarchical communion was taught in the Second Vatican Council. It's clear from our Lord's own example in forming the Church from the very beginning of his public ministry. And so this, well, there's a role for consultation, and according to the ancient synods, this is not an essential mark of the Church. This is extremely troublesome and dangerous, and it needs to be corrected. And now we have these study groups, or whatever they're called, and this is going to simply generate more confusion and division to the harm of the Church's mission. Mission we've been just talking about. We should be devoting our energy to the proclamation of the truth about human life, about human nature, human sexuality, marriage, the family, the religious freedom. This is what we need to give our attention to. And so I'm praying with all my might that this will be corrected.
Two U.S. cardinals, Your Eminence, Supich and McElroy, have called for the USCCB, the U.S. Bishops' Conference, to revamp its governance in order to reflect this synodal church. What does that even mean? And can we expect lay people, even non-Catholics, to be voting members of a national bishops' conference?
Well, of course not. And people who make these kind of proposals ought to be able to articulate clearly and understandably for the Catholic faithful what this means. Otherwise, this is very dangerous speech.
Your Eminence, we believe it there, Cardinal Raymond Burke. And you can visit Cardinal Burke's website at cardinalburke.com/presentations to read his moral questions regarding voting. It's worth a look. And also check out his new book, The Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe. It details the beauty, the history of the shrine and pilgrimage destination in La Crosse, Wisconsin. You can find it at EWTN's catalog at EWTNRC.com. Thank you, Your Eminence.
Thank you, Raymond.
And every election season, people always ask me, what would Mother Angelica, EWTN's foundress, say about this election, about this candidate? Well, this should give you a clue.
So, should you vote? Oh, yes, you should. Doesn't matter who we vote for. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm not going to vote for candidates. I vote for life. For life. I vote for life. Because it's an abomination to God, the culture of death. An abomination to God, the culture of death. I cannot vote for death. I vote for life. I vote for the God who gave us life and has a right, the only one who has a right to create life and call it forth to himself. The only one. You don't have a right. I don't have a right. Nobody has a right to call death upon someone God has called to life. if we don't stand for the principles of God, you will be next, because you're getting too old.
How's that for an ominous ending? You know, Mother had that prophetic rumble at certain times, and that was one of those times, and this is one of those times. The presidential election in the U.S. is only days away. For reaction and analysis of the closing arguments, we're joined by political commentator and chair of the American Conservative Union, Matt Schlapp. Matt, thanks for being here. I want to get your take on the overall numbers among swing state voters. Trump seems to be leading in the Sun Belt, while Harris has a slight lead further north. Everything is coming down to Pennsylvania, which is considered too close to call. Matt, how do you think Pennsylvania goes? Trump has spent a lot of time over the last few days and months in that region.
Yeah, they have to ask themselves, both campaigns have to ask themselves, is there anything more they can do in Pennsylvania to make a difference? After a while, it gets to be diminishing returns with so many ads and so many visits. The number one reason I think Donald Trump will win Pennsylvania is because he doesn't have Scranton Joe, you know, lunchbox or lunch bucket Joe. Joe Biden grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania. He always had a connection to that state. And Kamala Harris has the opposite. I think she turns a lot of those blue-collar Democrat working man and women votes off. And I think that's why Donald Trump will win.
Matt, let's talk about these closing arguments. I covered the Madison Square Garden event where it was estimated that some 100,000 people swarmed Midtown Manhattan. Only 20,000 could get into the garden. The energy and enthusiasm of that rally was incredible, but it was overshadowed by that comedian's line about Puerto Rico 5 hours before Trump appeared. Then President Biden called Trump supporters garbage on a Zoom call, provoking this response from Trump. Like the McDonald's drop-by, this dominated the news cycle, Matt. Is this connecting with independents and undecided voters?
Yeah, Raymond, you know, I think those are two iconic moments. Trump working the counter at McDonald's, which, by the way, was a secret fantasy of his. We all know this. He loves their French fries and everything else. And then donning that neon vest and getting in the garbage truck. But, Raymond, before we started talking, I just went through in my head. They called us a basket of deplorables. They said, you ain't black. They called Hispanics tacos. You're an extreme MAGA Republican. You're going to make us sick. You're a conspiracy theorist. You're an election denier. You're an insurrectionist. You're a Nazi. You're garbage. And now today, you're not strong or smart if you're a woman supporting Donald Trump. I mean, how are they going to get to the White House by insulting almost every American who's going to vote?
Matt, the Harris campaign seems to be struggling to humanize and still introduce their candidate. What did you make of Kamala's closing argument at the Ellipse earlier this week? I mean, this was her big closer. Did the Biden Zoom call kill it?
Yeah, it did. I think you have to ask yourself psychologically if Joe Biden even is trying to help her win, because I think his feelings are very hurt that they're not using him at all. And I think for Democrats, they're so in their own heads, you might say, or they're in the bubble where everybody is still so worked up about January 6th or that our democracy is on the line. I actually think for the American people, this is very discordant with what they care about. Both Democrats and Republicans, they're more practical. They don't want all these kids going overseas to conflicts they don't understand. They want that border closed. They don't like the crime that's come from the open border. But they want to be able to buy food, Raymond. Everyone's talking about how expensive food is and how expensive gas is and how home heating now, it was going to the winter months, is going through the roof. This is what the American people are worried about. They're not worried about our democracy. They're worried about our economy.
Matt, what do you make of these major newspapers, the Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, declining to endorse either candidate? How significant is this, and what does it tell you?
Well, both papers, the Los Angeles Times and the Washington Post, were bought by really successful entrepreneurs, billionaires. And I think it tells us what a businessman looking at this presidential race thinks, which is Kamala's not going to win. And so why be for her? And I think it's glorious that the Washington Post has lost 250,000 subscriptions. I canceled my subscription years ago. Now it's the left that's going to take down the Washington Post.
No, it's amazing. You're also seeing unions do the same thing that traditionally would endorse the Democratic candidate, and they're simply saying we're not endorsing anybody. So there does seem to be some cultural movement and political movement in these endorsements that aren't happening this year for the first time. Before we run out of time, I want to get your take on the security of this election process. We have been seeing reports of a ballot box arsonist. This guy struck drop boxes in Oregon, resulting in damaged or destroyed ballots. The Michigan Secretary of State this week has been addressing what she calls issues with electronic voting machines that may slow down, inconvenience voters. There was some bug in the system. What do you expect to see in the lead up to Tuesday? And do you think we'll have a president by November 6th?
Colorado put out the secret codes to the computer. Michigan sent out hundreds of thousands of ballots in a duplicative way. CPAC is monitoring these ballot boxes. These ballot boxes are on the street corners, vulnerable to anything. They're there day and night. This is insane. And by the way, we go all over the globe, Raymond. Nobody elects their president this way. This is a uniquely American thing. And the other thing Europe just did, they just had all their elections for the EU Parliament. They all knew the winners by that night. So to your question of will we know that night, we should. Every other democracy knows that night unless it's decided by something like the Florida recount in 2000. But we won't in America because part of these woke cities is trying to give the other side from me, every opportunity to find new ballots. And it's a real shame. In the whole world, we look like fools.
Well, I can't believe, Matt, that we are actually already battling in court. There was a battle to RFK Jr. trying to get himself off the ballots in the states. Now the Democrats have sued to keep him on the ballots. You had the Biden administration take on the state of Virginia that just wanted to purge their rolls of non-citizens. They lost that battle at the Supreme Court this week. But it troubles me that we're having a legal battle during, and I imagine after, a major election like this. This is no way to elect a president.
So I'll say it once again, 30 some odd countries, even more throughout Europe, they had their EU elections. You didn't read about anybody having to go to court. You didn't read any controversies about who was either on or off the voting rails. This is a distinctly cancerous form that's in America. And we've allowed it to metastasize because our cities are run by people. There's no bipartisanship in these cities anymore. And so, think about this. They tried to get RFK. They wouldn't allow him to get off the ballot, but yet 2 states said that Donald Trump couldn't appear on the ballot. And when Virginia went to the Supreme Court to say illegal shouldn't be on our election rules, only the Republican-appointed members, think about this, 6 members of the Supreme Court upheld the idea of the basics of voting rights. The 3 Democratic picks were fine with watering down the votes of all black people who are here, been here for a long time, to allow newcomers to water down their votes with illegal ballots. It is a shocking thing that's going on in our country.
Matt, I've got 2 minutes. Why do you think Trump has the edge with Catholic voters this election? And what do you think's driving that?
Well, one of the lists of things I didn't put on there is that they called us irredeemable as Catholics. They've said that the Knights of Columbus are a hate group. That was Kamala Harris when she'd have judicial picks come before her that were a member of the Knights of Columbus. They have a real animosity towards people of faith. We've seen at her rallies, people say Jesus is Lord or Jesus is King, and she says, you're at the wrong rally. Catholics will pick this next president. You know this, Raymond. They are the ultimate swing constituency. They will pick this next president. All the polls show that Donald Trump is getting their support. I think they know that he respects them as people of faith. He'll uphold the sanctity of the unborn child. He's been true to his word about the types of judges he'll pick. And I also just think Catholics, once again, they care about those staple issues, like how do we provide for our family? How are we going to pay our bills? And I think he connects with those voters.
Matt, we will leave it there. You can follow Matt Schlapp on X at @mschlapp. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Raymond.
Pope Francis ratified the final document on the 2024 Synod on Synodality on Sunday. Try saying that 5 times fast. So what happens next? Here to report, senior correspondent for the National Catholic Register, Edward Penton. Ed, welcome back. You were in Rome for the tail end of this synod. As I mentioned, the Pope ratified this final document. And I guess he's going to let it stand without issuing a customary apostolic exhortation, his own summary, his own teaching of what happened here. What does that indicate in your estimation?
Well, there are various theories about that, Raymond. I think part of it is that he thinks enough has been said on this, that he feels that he doesn't really have anything to add. He doesn't want to put anything else, his own signature on it, where he thinks this is a part of the synodal process. And so because it's been discussed, he's going to leave it open. He's going to leave these discussions open and possibly come back to them at some point in the next few years. But he also, I think, wants to hear what these special study groups are going to say. These 10 study groups who are studying these controversial issues, they're going to continue discussions up until June next year, I believe.
Ed, your recent column focused on the African bishops' participation in this synod. What was the nature of their participation, and were their voices sufficiently heard?
Yes, well, they came away very pleased with it. They said, I spoke to Archbishop Nkea, who's a Cameroonian archbishop, and he's on the ordinary council of the synod, which is quite important in terms of organizing it. And he was really very happy with it in the sense that he said the African bishops came prepared. They didn't want, they were very concerned about this decentralization, especially on faith and morals, and they came away feeling quite happy that that was blocked. But there are openings still in the final document towards decentralization, so they're probably going to keep an eye on that.
Ed, speaking of voices, there were a lot of voices at the Synod pressers and in these closed-door study groups about deaconesses and LGBT issues and climate, but the voices of tradition and traditional Catholics seem to be very muted during this synod. You had an encounter with Cardinal Jean-Claude Hollerich, who's the Relator General of this synod, and you questioned him about the absence of those traditional voices. What did you learn?
Yes, well, I went up to him at the end of the final press conference, because I just wanted to know why he was talking about the shortage of vocations, as were other participants. And of course, the vocations are being the biggest growth of vocations and church attendance is in the traditional groups. So I wanted to know why those weren't considered. They weren't even mentioned in the press conferences or in the synod. And he just responded saying that, he has friends who celebrate the traditional mass, and he can imagine that in a postmodern world getting attracted by that, and he doesn't condemn it. But then when I pushed him and I said, why weren't their views considered? He just said it wasn't a topic for discussion. He said we weren't against them, nor were we for them. But we discussed things brought up from the people of God. And then he said these people, as he put it, these people have not written to us, which isn't totally true, because I think in the consultation stages, there was a lot of participation from traditional groups. It's just that they got sort of filtered out as the synod went on.
Before I let you go, Ed, Cardinal Angelo Becciu, implicated and convicted in the Vatican financial scandal, gave a recent interview to Belgian TV. There he claims, of all things, that Cardinal George Pell, the late Cardinal Pell, authorized the huge sums of money transferred from the Vatican to Australia. Ed, quickly, what are you hearing about this allegation, and what do you know to be true?
Well, I've heard that it's certainly not true, and because he wouldn't have actually authorized it. It came from the Secretariat of State. It was about Peter's pence, and Cardinal Pell wasn't involved in any of those kind of exchanges or transfers. But also, I know from when I talked to Cardinal Pell, he was very keen to find out more about these transfers of money to Australia. Right. Which shows that he wouldn't have, if he'd given permission for them, he wouldn't ever have wanted to know more about them. So I think that's just a very, it's certainly not true. And also there's a lot of dubious things around this transfer about why they were sent to Australia, what they were for. And of course, the suspicion is it was sent to influence the trial against Cardinal Pell. And we don't know that for sure, but that's the suspicion.
Well, Ed, on my show as well, on camera, Cardinal Pell questioned the source of those transfers of monies and the reason they were sent. If he had authorized them, he wouldn't be raising a public specter. He did this repeatedly during many of the last interviews we both did with him. It makes no sense if he was the source of the transfer. But I suppose Beshu thinks dead men tell no tales, but with videotape, they actually can. Edward, we'll leave it there. You can follow Ed's reportage and columns on X at Edward Penton. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Raymond.
Now with analysis of the aftermath of this month-long synod and the final document and much more, I'm joined by the editor of thecatholicthing.org, Robert Royal, and also from the Archdiocese of New York, Father Gerald Murray. Thank you both for being here. Let's start with this synod final document, which was ratified by Pope Francis this week. Immediate publication was approved, but the Pope will not issue his own separate apostolic exhortation. Father, does the document have binding teaching authority?
Well, that's what the Pope established, that if he approves and accepts the final document of a synod, that becomes part of the papal magisterium. Which is quite something because the Pope didn't author this document. So he's taking the words of someone else or a group and putting them, making them his own. A little bit strange because the way the Synod was first founded, the Synod was an advisory body meant to help inform the Pope on his decisions. And now essentially he's saying whatever decision they arrive at, if I approve of it, I'll take the whole document for my own. It is definitely, that's a novelty and an innovation in church practice.
Bob, last week you alerted us to a conference that happened 3 days following the Synod, which really was a synthesis of a rebranding, if you will, of the Synod itself. And they made some pretty bold proclamations there that this Synod goes beyond Vatican II, is the fruit of Vatican II. What does all of this mean?
Well, it's difficult to say. Actually, what they're saying is it's the mature fruit, that actually what they believe happened is that the ecclesiology, which is the theology of the church that was put forward in Vatican II, is now starting to reach, its mature fruitfulness in what that they're doing. And they have this phrase about the circularity of synodality, where Vatican II is interpreted in terms of synodality, and synodality is interpreted in terms of Vatican II. It just seems to me a way to make a claim that there's a there's consequences for what is pretty much a murky document at the end of the day, and it's trying to connect it back to the heady days of the 1970s when everybody was kind of excited about what happened after Vatican II. There's one large insight in synodality, and that is that people should be talking more with one another. But that said, once you look at the final proposals, it's all pretty much plain stuff.
The Vatican, it's amazing. They have this big synod, but the story that has sort of grabbed the popular imagination that Catholics are actually focused on is the unveiling of a brand new anime mascot for their 2025 Jubilee year. It's called Luce, and it's an androgynous, blue-haired waif, which means light in Italian, by the way. Archbishop Rino Fisichella, the organizer of the Jubilee, revealed this character at a press conference earlier this week. Now, supporters say this character is a fun way to engage the pop culture and young people. I've been told by sources at the Vatican that this is actually a branding and merchandising play. My question, Father, how does this engage young men, which is the real problem for the church today? And if you need a mascot, why not use this one? Father, what did you think when you first saw this character?
No, this is imitating the world that we need, mascots and theme songs and skits and YouTube videos. You know what the theme for the Jubilee year should be? Jesus Christ, crucified and risen from the dead. The crucifix is our focus when we think about Jesus dying and then rising for us. So the risen Lord, the crucified Lord, the Sacred Heart of Jesus, the Pope issued a encyclical about that recently. Wouldn't it have been nice if we had a picture of the Sacred Heart of Jesus as the official logo? But then again, why are we into logos? We don't need logos.
Yeah.
We're not a brand. This is revelation. This is the Church of God. So now, for me, this is an example of the church saying the only way we can be relevant is if we make ourselves relevant. And relevancy means, what do the TV people think is important? What are they going to put on the screen? No, the way we're relevant is we say Jesus Christ is the Lord of the universe. Follow him.
Well, I question who the target audience is for this. Is it, 7-year-old girls? I mean, in Japan? I mean, is that the focus? Is that who you're trying to reach here? But to make this a global mascot for this Jubilee year, it's an odd choice. But Bob, the creator of this mascot has in the past created LGBT pride artwork. This is some of his creations. He's also a designer of anime-covered sex toys, which I will spare showing our audience. But Bob, why would this designer be chosen of all people?
Well, as we've seen in the past, the Vatican seems to have a philo-homosexual orientation when it comes to artworks. They've chosen people like this in the past. One priest I was talking with joked that at least it's not Rupnik, which of course would have even been worse than what we have. The thing for me is that we don't seem to be an adult church any longer. You can make too much out of this little mascot, I suppose, and maybe in a way it does some good somewhere. But a Jubilee year is a very serious thing. If you look back at what Jubilee means in the Hebrew scriptures, it's proclaiming the year of freedom to captives, slaves are freed, people return to the land, debts are canceled, they blow the shofar. Jubilee means to blow the shofar. So here we are with what is supposed to be a very deep spiritual adult event. And instead what we're going to get is I think you're right to say, a marketing campaign. And it reflects there's an element inside the church that just doesn't really get it.
Well, I had, a Protestant pastor friend reach out to me and say, Raymond, in the week that they've released a report on sexual abuse of minors, why would you have an elderly bishop touching this little childlike androgynous figure at the end of the table at a press conference? The optics of that are so wrong. And, I had to backpedal and explain what was happening here. But let's move on from this. I want to talk about the final document again and what might be coming next from this synod. It seems like female deacons remain an open question, and there may even be a new mass in the offing. Here's Cardinal Jean-Claude Hollerich answering independent journalist Diane Montagna about women's access to diaconal ministry. Watch.
Number 60, which received the most no votes of all of the document, says that the question of women's access to diaconal ministry remains open. In what sense does it remain open? And especially in light of Pope Francis's comments that women cannot be deacons.
Though the Father hasn't said women will be ordained deacon, he has not said women will not be ordained deacon. He has just said it remains open, it has to be studied.
Father, this just won't go away, this topic of female ordination. Why can't this be dealt with definitively? I thought this was settled.
No, it is already settled. It is impossible to ordain a woman a deacon. If a bishop attempts to do that, he is violating the doctrine of the faith. He would be doing something that's worthy of a canonical penalty. This is wrong. There are no women deacons in the Catholic Church, no matter what the radicals say. And the notion that this thing has not been studied sufficiently enough to arrive at a definitive historical exposition of why there are no deacons, it's quite clear. This is a political move by the women's ordination crowd, and as soon as they get the bishops to bend or the Pope to bend and say, okay, we can have women deacons but no priests and bishops, they're immediately going to turn around and say, you hypocrites, if you can give us the sacrament of holy orders at the level of deacon, you must give us the sacrament of holy orders at the level of priest and bishop. This is a radical attempt to make the Catholic Church in the image of the modern world, which unfortunately is infected with this feminist notion that if women can't do everything that men do, then there's a violation of women's rights. That is not the truth. Jesus Christ and the Church do not violate the rights of anyone when they restrict the sacrament of holy orders to men, because that's the intention that Christ had.
Father, the final document also calls for a synodal liturgical celebration. Paragraph 27 of the final document says celebratory styles that make visible the church or the face of a synodal church is what's needed. Father, it goes on to urge the establishment of study groups to which would be entrusted reflection on this new Mass. Another study group. What the heck is a synodal liturgical celebration, Father?
No one knows, and it has no meaning that anyone can refer to, because it will have to be made up by the people in charge, then imposed on the church in the name of the people. I mean, this is classic bureaucratic way of effecting a velvet revolution. You announce that the people demand that we do something, then we do it, and when the people are horrified, you say, no, you told us to do it, you must accept it. No, there's no such thing as a synodal Mass. Does that mean that women are going to be preaching because now that lay people can vote in a synod, we want lay people to preach at the Mass? I mean, and I go back to this. We have people who are being thrown out of their churches because they pray the Mass of the Ages, the Tridentine Mass. And what is the Vatican doing? They're saying we need to rework the new Mass to be synodal, which no one knows what it means. This is chaos in the life of the church.
Hollerich was asked about this at the press conference. Listen.
The style of synodality and the style of liturgy, and how we need to adopt celebratory styles that make visible the face of a synodal church. I would just like to ask what that means.
So we have a liturgy, the one of Paul VI, the Second Vatican Council. The fact is that many people have written at the beginning, when the Synod started in its first and second phase, that they had problems, that sometimes the liturgy did not speak to them. It's just, how can it be a little bit more participatory?
Bob, they've been implementing the Paul VI Mass of Vatican II for over 60 years. It doesn't seem to be helping. But now we need another revision of the new Mass. Is the Amazon Rite study that's in process right now, a new Amazon Rite, is that a predicate for what we could see here with this synodal Mass?
Yeah, I think absolutely it is. I mean, they mention in the document things like lay people preaching and having, all these different roles. I would actually think that in a place like the Amazon, it might almost work. It depends what they come out with, because more traditional societies have a kind of a sense of a depth of spirituality. I think that anything that is likely to be pursued as a synodal liturgy is going to partake of this same kind of lack of direction and superficiality and kind of anxious searching after we don't even know what, that was characteristic of the Synod over the past 3 or 4 years. I think it's a very bad idea. The fact that the delegates recommended that there be another study group, as if this is something that now may become habitual, that we're going to have study groups about whatever people seem to think they want. I think that's going to take us into just swampy waters with almost no way out unless we just stop it now.
Father, is a new Mass what young people really want? I mean, maybe they could just do a robotic Luce and in every sanctuary, and it can offer Mass. Our own churchy cheese everywhere, I guess. I'm sure that'll excite the kids.
In my life, I've watched adults who are clueless about how to reach teenagers and young adults come up with ideas which essentially say, kids go to rock concerts. Hey, let's make church into a rock concert. Kids read Harry Potter. Well, let's reduce religion to the level of that. Kids like to eat hamburgers. Let's make the church into a dining hall. I mean, this is ridiculous. We're supposed to elevate people to the level of saying, what counts in life is God in heaven. And we're going to bring you up to life in heaven through the Mass and through prayer and sacrifice and charity. Instead of this nonsense, mascots, new Masses, come on. I mean, if I'm getting exasperated, forgive me, but this is silliness. After 4 years of supposedly helping the church promote its mission, we're coming up with a mascot and a demand for a new Mass. I mean, this is nutty.
Yeah. Well, my question is, where's the study group into the Tridentine Mass, which is actually drawing young people who are drawn to the mystery, drawn to the submission to God and His will, having large families, sacrality, holiness? Where is that study group? That's the only study that's never mentioned, never brought up, and the only phenomenon in the church that's vibrant, that's completely ignored by the people running the synod. It really is, I got to tell you, it's not only silly and nutty, Father, it's infuriating. Look, I brought this up with the Cardinal earlier, and it bears repeating. Cardinals Cupich and McElroy are pushing for the governance of the USCCB to be revamped, to be more synodal. And now Archbishop Timothy Broglio, the president of the Bishops' Conference in the U.S., is now saying that, quote, invitations to involve the faithful by local bishops is crucial to implementing the next phase of the synod. Father, I said this at the start of last year's synod. The goal is to change governance of the church, not doctrine. Am I right?
Yeah, no, this is a very serious point. In fact, this is the most serious threat, apart from the diaconate, to the constitutional order in the church. Governing power resides with those who are ordained. It does not reside with the laity. This is absolutely clear. There is no question about this. We are not a Presbyterian or Congregationalist form of Protestant church where everybody gets together and votes on everything. Now, the idea that the USCCB needs to be restructured in a synodal way, you know, I remember that synodalism means consensus. Remember they said that? In fact, the voting is kind of like something they were hoping they could control, which in a sense they did. But, you know, the idea that the exposition of opposite ideas will produce light and truth, they don't want that. They want consensus. So I think what this is a move to say the American bishops all have to agree on everything, and we have to get some lay people in there involved as experts and join us in it. And that's just going to be a bog down, and it's not the way it works. There is an executive committee, and that's elected by the Mass of the Bishops. That is how the thing runs. It should continue to run that way.
Father, when they ratified this final document, the Pope used one of his favorite terms. He said this: rigidity is a sin that often enters into clerics, consecrated men, and women. Father, is rigidity really the problem facing the church now? And what is that code for, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, this is a very serious problem, the use of this word rigidity, because rigidity imputes to people a psychological or emotional disorder which results in an inability to change, adapt, or innovate in their own life, and then they impose that on others. In other words, it's saying if you are a doctrinal defender of the truth, if you are an Orthodox Catholic who will not budge on the doctrine of the faith, then you are afflicted with rigidity. And the implication is, if you only loosened up psychologically, then you'd all agree with everybody and we could all change things as we want. I'm tired of hearing this. I remember hearing this way back in the 70s and 80s. It really is a psychological slam word designed to silence people who do not agree with the liberal agenda in the church. And it should not be used. I mean, all the time we talk about listening to others and respecting them. What kind of respect is being shown when you tell priests who defend the doctrine of the faith, you're rigid, and that's a sin, and you have a problem, and you need to change? That's not dialogue.
Look, I want to make one final point about this rigid, since you brought this up, because we do see some rigidity in the way that they handled it. And rigidity is good in some respects. Look, one of the images that they used for the synod is to enlarge your tent. Well, if you have a tent, you want the fabric to be flexible, but you want the frame to be rigid. Otherwise, you don't have a tent.
Gents, we will leave it there for now. For commentary by Robert Royal and Father Gerald Murray, visit thecatholicthing.org. Thank you, gents. That is all the time we have for now. Be sure to tune in next week when we should have a new president, or will we? Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thanks for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo. Bye now.